The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. I've said before, I don't really care very much about stuff related to royal families. I don't like the idea of monarchy, and every time I talk about it, most of my audience agrees, but some people say, David, you don't understand the rich history of the British royal family and the value to the country for tourism or whatever. Fine. There is now a scandal, which is simply a scandal that is involving Prince Charles in the UK, which is that it became known that he had a relationship with the late Jeffrey Epstein and that he would hang out with Jeffrey Epstein. And this was all made even worse after he recently did an interview on Newsnight, during which he was asked questions about this, and it just went absolutely horribly wrong. And it was described as a car crash by multiple charities and companies that decided they need to get out of their relationships with Prince Charles. And now what they're doing, Pat, is that they are going to be apparently reducing the number of royals that are part of the core royal family. And he will also be stepping down from his duties as a member of the royal family, which is hilarious because the fact that they have duties is still something that I have trouble getting behind, but okay, they do. Things going very, very wrong for the royal family.
Yeah, and I checked out that BBC interview. It was a total car crash.
Yeah.
Prince Andrew was saying that the account that the woman associated with Jeffrey Epstein gave of Prince Andrew and this young lady hanging out couldn't have possibly been true because apparently she alleged that Prince Andrew had been sweating, and Prince Andrew said that he had a condition at the time which didn't allow him to even sweat. So like, that just seemed like a very weird defense to give.
It's an extraordinarily narrow defense.
Yeah, and just judging by his body language and his demeanor, it definitely seemed like he was guilty. And that's why he was thrown out of Buckingham Palace and doesn't have these royal duties anymore. But yeah, I mean, this whole thing seems very antiquated. And I would imagine that there's going to be some maybe some pushback against continuing the royal family once Queen Elizabeth dies, because I think right now everyone kind of views the Queen as like, oh, well, she's just this cute, sweet old lady. We're not going to try to bother her by upending the monarchy or anything like that. But once King Charles takes over, I think people are going to have a little bit more pause about it. Like, why are we giving the reins of power over to this guy now?
Well, I think it's interesting. And by the way, I may have misspoken before and said Prince Charles when I meant to say Prince Andrew. And if that's the case, I apologize. But that might have been like 2 minutes ago. I'm just now realizing I may have had a brain fart. I do think that there is something about the optics of people are less likely to see this sweet elderly lady as an instrument of, empire. And it's much easier to just say, it's all fine, we'll just continue it, it's a tradition. But if the reins were to change hands, I do agree with you, Pat, that I think that the perception would be different. But still, I don't think that that's going to do away with the royal family.
Yeah, especially because we know about Prince Charles, one day King Charles. We know about his past and his relationships and the interesting quotes that he has said, like he once told a woman he was having an affair with, who I think he's now married to, that he wanted to be a tampon so he could be inside her. I mean, just there's things that you wouldn't want the public to know about.
No.
He also has this weird connection with like pseudoscience and these homeopathy medicines and things that just have absolutely no bearing in reality, things that can't be proven true. So he has all these weird ideas, and that probably to some extent has to do with the fact that he grew up inside this like elite bubble and wasn't really brought up in the same society that everyone else was. So yeah, I mean, I think it is one of these old vestiges of imperialism, of like the old way of doing things, the old way of running a government. And I can't imagine it going on for too much longer. But then there's that tourism argument that people always make. I mean, every time you go to London, you want to check out Buckingham Palace. You may want to go take the trip over to Windsor Castle. Like, I would imagine it is very profitable for that country.
When I was in London a couple of years ago, and I'm actually going again in a few weeks, I didn't do any of the royal family related stuff. Like, I just don't care. And I understand Buckingham Palace as a building is probably super interesting to see. I walked by the outside a couple of times. I'm not really into tours, where you get led around with someone with a flag that you have to follow and a little headset mic and a tiny little speaker. I'm so against that stuff. And I also just don't care about royal families, that I didn't do any royal family related stuff, didn't go to Windsor Castle or any of it. And I have to tell you, Pat, I don't plan to this time around either.
The Tower of London is pretty cool, though, and that's not. I mean, it's not like they live there anymore. It's
No.
just kind of like the old stuff where they used to live, and the crown jewels are there. That I would recommend checking out. But yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious now that the monarchy doesn't actually have an active role in politics. They're just kind of like a ceremonial head of state. But still, it is weird that this one family gets this taxpayer-funded, luxurious life, whereas everyone else just has to live like a normal person.
It's insane.
Kind of strange.
Yeah.
Why we still have that.
Now, when you went to see the jewels and the tower and the whole thing, is there a big wait for that? Do you have to wait in line for a long time?
I don't think there was a big wait. I mean, there's a tour group that you can go around with, and I would highly recommend that because you do pick up on things that you wouldn't just exploring the Tower of London on its own.
Sure.
And also, that's in an area where you can check out other things really easily. It's close to a lot of other stuff. So I would definitely check that out if you haven't done so before.
I did go to the British Museum, and they have not only the Rosetta Stone, which is fascinating, if you can get people to stop taking flash photography of it for even a moment, that you can actually look calmly at what's going on. But they have a ton of really old artifacts, Egyptian artifacts, and a bunch of others. And I found the British Museum super interesting.
That is a good one. And there's also a City of London museum that's lesser known, but I would also recommend that one as well. That more has to do with English history and history of London itself, whereas you're right, the British Museum is more international.
The one thing I did not enjoy that much is I was going to Shakespeare's Globe Theater. How exciting. And I know that I just lacked the historical knowledge to know this in advance, but I thought we were really going to an old theater. And you get there, and after you start the tour, they say, yeah, so this is new. The Globe Theater is not here anymore, but we've rebuilt this thing that's sort of like what we believe it was, and it used to be a couple 100 feet that way. I instantly was like, is this why am I paying for this all of a sudden?
Yeah, I would ask for a refund, especially if it's not in the exact same footprint of the original Globe. If they're really telling you it was a few blocks away or whatever, then I've lost all interest. Because, if it was a reconstruction, I could think, all right, well, I understand, like, the original Globe must have burnt down at least once. But, at least this is in the exact same place where the actor stood and maybe Shakespeare watched his own performances. No, if you don't even have that going for you, I don't see the point in going to the Globe Theater.
It was a disappointment. The tour guide was really good, though. I will give him that. Okay, there is a difference, which most of us understand, between a bad dream and a nightmare. The nightmare is the acutely, often scary or distressing dream from which you wake up sometimes yelling, sometimes out of breath. I think most of us understand what an actual true nightmare is. Then there are also bad dreams in which something happens that's not nice. There's a moderate level of fear. For different people, it's probably a little different. But I think most of us sort of, Pat, understand that at least conceptually there are nightmares and there are bad dreams. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and I have both of them. So I would know better than most people the difference between the two things.
So there has been a study done that looked at what is the effect of bad dreams, not nightmares, but bad dreams on human psychology. And it turns out that people who have bad dreams, not nightmares, often react much more moderately to bad things in real life, to things in real life that cause fear, to bad news in real life. And I guess the idea or the inference that we could draw from it is if you sort of process bad events, not nightmares, but just bad events, sad events, tragic events, some degree of, maybe being hurt or whatever in dreams, you may be, in a sense, preparing the mind to better handle events in the real world. That's the very big overview of this new study. And I guess it sort of does make some intuitive sense, I would say.
Yeah, it's like you've lived through a simulation so that once the actual event in your life comes around and you have to deal with it, you're better prepared for it because it's kind of like you've been through it before.
Yes.
I mean, when I think of a bad dream, I think of maybe, dreaming that one of your loved ones passes away or something like that, maybe a grandparent, maybe a parent, whereas a nightmare would be, oh my God, some monster is attacking me and I have to go hide in my closet. And that doesn't seem to be productive in any way because you're not actually going to have to one day deal with an event like that, most likely. But, something like, one of your parents or grandparents dying, you will eventually have to deal with. And so a bad dream about that subject may actually help you when it does happen.
Yeah, and it turns out that with nightmares, there is a negative effect that continues after you wake up, whereas the idea with the bad dreams is that there may be negative feelings immediately upon waking, but then once you acclimate to the fact that it didn't happen, it may actually provide a sort of insulating effect for dealing with the challenges of everyday life. Interesting study. They do plan to study nightmares in more detail as well. I have another one of these stories for you that is being presented as just a delightful, inspirational story of hard work and dedication and blah, 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 and it's actually BS. It's actually one of these dystopian stories. And the story is there's a McDonald's employee, Ike Baker, who's 92 years old. He's one of the oldest employees ever at McDonald's, and he has no plan to retire at all. And of course, for me, this is extraordinarily sad. Now, I know that, it's possible that a 92-year-old wants to be working at McDonald's. I understand that a lot of people like to continue jobs late into life because of the social aspect of it or whatever. But I get very sad when I read these stories, Pat. For me, it's not inspirational or anything like it.
Yeah, for the most part, I would imagine these people are in this situation not because they want to be, but because they have to be. They don't typically want to be working, but they have to make a living somehow, and maybe they've outlived their savings, or a number of things could have happened. So, like this gentleman, he's been working at this McDonald's location for 21 years.
Yeah,
that takes him back to being 71 years of age. That suggests to me maybe he had a typical career, worked until he was 60, 65, and retired, and then maybe ran out of funds, and then at 71 had to make ends meet, had to find a new job. I mean, I'm not entirely sure that's what happened in this scenario, but if not in this one, I'm sure there are plenty other ones like that.
And everybody's framing everything as it's just so great. He gets along great with other employees, and the customers have gotten to know him and all this stuff. That's fine. I don't want to take away. It feels inappropriate for me, without knowing the particular circumstances, to come in and be patronizing and say, I'm sure this guy doesn't really want to be there and also is there out of necessity. Like, I don't know that in this particular case, but this is similar to the stories where what we really should be asking is, why is it that so many people can never retire? Why is it that there are so many cases where, again, little Jimmy gets sick when he's 7 and needs to do a bake sale to raise money for cancer treatment? Like, it may be inspirational in some way that there are people around Jimmy that are being nice. I don't deny that. But the infrastructure that makes it necessary for a bake sale fundraiser to be done when a kid has cancer, that's a problem no matter how nice everybody's being.
Yeah, we treat these as inspiring stories, whereas if you put this exact same story in like the European context or just pretty much anywhere else in the world, they would probably think that this is shameful, that someone at this age would have to work just to make a living. And if you even look at like the comment section of this article, they're all positive. Like one person said, I have a 68-year-old friend who sweeps, wipes down the tables, makes sure there are napkin straws at at McDonald's, and she loves her job. Go for it, Gramps. I mean, that's just like completely tone deaf, I think, to the scenario that's actually going on here. And another little side note, at 92, this man may be the oldest McDonald's employee. I also think he may be the oldest. I think he may be even older than any customers that go to McDonald's, given the quality of their food over there.
Yeah, it's not clear anybody survives to 92 on McDonald's food. No, maybe that's a tasteless joke. Tasteless. I'm not even trying to use a pun, but they just keep coming out. Okay, so that's the story. I don't know that we should be celebrating this. And I think another way to say it is, in the same way that with like the Jimmy is sick, we're doing a bake sale fundraiser, it's okay to recognize the positive actions of individuals while still pointing out the problematic overarching structure that leads to them. Like, we can do both at the same time, I think, without being critical of individuals.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes there's a story where like little Jimmy has a bake sale, and then some millionaire philanthropist comes along, recognizes that Jimmy's doing a bake sale, and then pays for it. And that's not like a good solution either.
Right.
Because like you can't scale that. Like, it's not like every problem can be solved with such someone, taking this into their own hands and having a bake sale, or, depending on these millionaire philanthropists to bail you out. Like, there has to be a more systemic approach to all of this, and we're just not seeing that right now.
Yeah, none of those things are policy, I think, is the point. Like, having classmates that help with the bake sale, you might have it or you might not, but that's not healthcare policy. Having a billionaire who's inspired by little Jimmy being sick and baking muffins to pay for his own cancer treatment, it might fix the situation for Jimmy, but it's not a policy. It's not a way that we manage healthcare, and it simply doesn't work. In any case, let me know your thoughts when you hear about stories like Ike at 92 working at McDonald's. Am I missing something here? Is there some other element to this that we should be discussing? That does it for today. We will have a new show and a new bonus show tomorrow, and starting at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow, we will be streaming the House Judiciary Committee's impeachment hearings. Hope you'll join me for that, as well as for tomorrow's program.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.